35 films, Martin, that's quite a legacy. You've created a lot of candles to shed light on the religious and spiritual practices of the American public. But I have to ask you, what prompted your decision to make films on religious themes in the first place? How did you start on this particular journey?
Well, on a professional level, I have one degree in religious studies. I studied religion formally in school, and then I have one degree in film and television making. So I always wanted to put those together, and I've told the story to you many times, but and this is what I've loved to do now for the last 40 years. And when we go, my wife and I, we go into bookstores, which are few and far between. We go into a bookstore, we go in holding hands. She goes off to business and technology. That's what she teaches on the university level. I go over to religion and history and philosophy, and we meet at the cash register. And whoever has the most books pays. That's how we do it. And this is always, you know, I always come back with my arm full of books. It's what I love to do. I feel really lucky that somewhere along the line, I feel blessed that I was able to find myself. I think I found what I really love to do. And there are two people here. I was just talking to a dear friend. There are two people. If I could just
please,
one
please.
You mentioned that I had done. I started with a film on Seventh-day Adventist back in 2004, and that was really possible because of one of the people that's here tonight, and he's a legend in the Seventh-day Adventist community. He's been, as one of the founders of ADRA. And he was the one who really encouraged me to really take it seriously, to make a film on Seventh-day Adventists, and to really tie it to Seventh-day Adventist, the health ministry of Seventh-day Adventists, and that's Ralph Watts. And I'm really thrilled that he's been on this evening. And as you know, as part of that series of films that I did, I also did a film on Seventh-day Adventist education called The Blueprint. You have, if you didn't know this, the second largest private education system in the world. And that was made possible through the encouragement and I think the leadership of Alyssa Keto, who is, I think, really one of the pioneers in Adventist education. And she's come out this evening with her husband, Dan. So thank you guys. So it's nice to be back in the Inland Empire where we have a lot of friends. And it's just been a wonderful experience these last 20 years. So I'm in debt to all of you.
Thank you. And you know, you should all talk with Ralph and Alyssa afterwards. They want to talk to you, I know. They can tell you stories about Martin that he's forgotten. So, I have a question about the Sabbath film. When you took that topic to PBS and said, I want to do a 2-hour film on Sabbath, that's a little different than your other films have been. What was their response? What did they say?
They were open to it, I think primarily because I said from the outset that I would do it looking at Sabbath through multiple faiths. And they liked that. And that was a perfect topic for public television, and a perfect topic for me. I mean, I don't hide the fact that I make these films because this is what I'm interested in, or I need it, or I need to explore this at a deeper level. And so I was feeling sort of Sabbath deprived. The genesis of this film came in at a time when we were all home, we sequestered because of COVID. Couldn't go out into the community, couldn't go to public gatherings, couldn't go to the lunches afterwards, the opportunities to gather with your friends. And so that was one of the reasons why I said, well, this is what we're missing. And that was sort of the combination of that and my own sense of this is where we have to be thinking about this. And this is what, in some ways, I think America's missing. There's a wonderful sociologist whose name is Robert Putnam, wrote a wonderful book called Bowling Alone, about the notion that America is beginning to deteriorate because it does no longer come together in community. He used the example of bowling, but it's really true. I mean, churches have created the foundation for how we gather in so many different dimensions. And that was taken away from us during the COVID period. And so I thought, Sabbath is the sort of the clarion call. When we get back into this, this is what we have to remember. That, and plus the film that I had done before this was a film called on Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And I want to pay tribute to Heschel. I never got, obviously, to meet Abraham Heschel, but I'm a very good friend of his daughter. And if you watch the Sabbath film, I spent quite a bit of time with Susanna Heschel, and she is a marvelous theologian in her own right. And she is the standard bearer for her father. And Heschel, it was really Heschel who sort of broke open the notion of Sabbath in a whole new way. And as you know, he's not only, Abraham Heschel is not only revered within the Jewish communities, Reform and Conservative Orthodox, but also in Seventh-day Adventists. And rarely is there a theologian in the Seventh-day Adventist world that I meet that isn't aware and really has fallen in love with the book The Sabbath by Abraham Heschel. So having read that for that film, that all sort of put it back on the plate for me.
So having decided to get into this journey around Sabbath and having sort of blithely saying, I'm going to do a multi-faith journey about Sabbath, and they all said, well, that's good, go for it. What surprised you? What did you discover in this process that you weren't expecting?
Well, I didn't realize that there were a lot of people out there celebrating or honoring what they call a tech Sabbath. There are a lot of people who don't consider themselves to be religious. In fact, some of them are really anti-religious when you ask. But they're practicing what they think of as a tech Sabbath. And they didn't need to call it Sabbath. They could have just said, I'm taking a day off from my technology. I'm putting down the cell phone. I'm walking away from the laptop. I'm sort of going to put it all down for this day. But in fact, they call it a tech Sabbath, and it's openly being practiced by a lot of people. But of course, they call it Sabbath because they understand that it's derived from something sacred and holy. And I think that's really a tribute to the whole the notion of Sabbath. And for me, I think I came. One of the things I came away with is we talk about Sabbath and rest. But the word that stayed with me over the course of the process of making the film was the word content. It's not not a word you hear very often in the American conversation. The word content. But that's the word that's really sort of stuck with me, because I think ultimately, one of the rabbis says when God finished making the world, he didn't rest because he was tired, but he was actually content with what had been created. It was good. And that one has stayed with me. And so the mantra that I use for my own Sabbath now is to say that this is the one day of the week that I can feel a sense of contentment, because we all feel as though we have to compete. It's a very driven world we live in. But I think Sabbath becomes the day for me where I can actually stop, pause, and say to myself that I've done enough, and I have enough, and I am enough. And those are the three things that have resonated with me is what I want to get out of this day, this sense of contentment, that what's been given to me and what I can share back.
That's. I have to ask though, of all the Sabbath practices among these varied groups that you observed and filmed and talked with people that are doing different things, exercising the contentment in some way, which ones do you sort of stand out to you?
Oh, Seventh-day Adventist.
Yeah. What are the practices, the specific practices that an individual, regardless of their faith or lack thereof, can take on, do you think are valuable and worthwhile?
I think, there's a wonderful book written by a Jewish woman by the name of Judith Shulevitz. She's interviewed in the film. You saw her in the trailer. She wrote a wonderful, masterful work, a 7-year project for her, called The Sabbath World. And she's convinced that eating, the meal that's put together, is the sort of centerpiece of what it means to really stop and gather. You prepare, and really sort of the metaphor of Sabbath. And I get what she means, because you prepare for it. So you're not cooking it on Sabbath. You're actually doing all the preparation in advance.
Yes.
And then you celebrate. People come together. We started off, the trailer has the family doing that exact thing. And so for me, that's the practice, the practice of the meal, I think, is really what I think a lot of people were missing in this country today.
So we're going to have a clip before Rabbi Rosenberg speaks with us, and you entitled it Sabbath and Ritual. Where does this fit in your sort of pantheon of Sabbath practice?
Well, I think it's at the center. I mean, in some ways, religion and faith, the expression of your faith is ritualistic, and I think that's a good thing. I think it puts us on a schedule, and it allows us to sort of prepare for it and think in advance, make sure that we're ready for the moment. To me, I was privileged to be part of Chabad dinners in a number of different people's homes, and it's just being with people who are navigating their way to God the same way I'm trying to navigate my way through all of this to God is just, it does the soul good. It just does. And I felt honored to be with them, to break bread together. I also want to tell you that one of the people who's going to come up here in a minute, as your invitation has shown, is Rabbi Arthur Rosenberg. And I want you to give him a big welcome when he comes up, because he's a dear friend. We go back 10 years. He was in a film that I had done on chaplains. I don't know if anybody saw that, but we did a film a number of years ago about chaplains, which is just a wonderful way to express your tradition in the midst of people